million cases worldwide, and this is just an estimate. And it is a 150 billion annual industry. If we were in person, I would ask you, why do you think that it is making so much money? Well, there's a couple of reasons. The main one, it's because sadly, a lot of drug dealers and people that used to traffic illegal arms, they realize that selling a person is much more profitable than selling drugs or illegal arms, because a person, sadly, you can sell them over and over and over again. When a drug deal, you just sell that drug once and then you have to find out where to bring more. And then the other reason, it's because it is harder for law enforcement to capture someone that is trafficking humans compared to someone that is trafficking drugs. In Texas, it is estimated that there are 313,000 victims, and out of those, 79,000 are minors and youth. That is massive numbers, and we really want to lower those numbers, and that is why you're here today, so that you can learn more and join us in the prevention part of it. Human trafficking, it is against the US. Thankfully, there is a great law that protects all victims of human trafficking, and this is the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. This is a very wordy slide that I hate, so we're going to move on to the next one, and it's basically explaining the concepts that have to be involved so that it can be a trafficking situation under the eyes of the law. And those are the AMP model, or the actions, means, and purpose. Actions are the crime. All of those words under the action column are the crimes. So we have recruiting, transporting, obtaining, patronizing, soliciting, advertising. And many times we don't think about all of those as the trafficker, but under the eyes of the law, they are. Why is it for you so important for you to know as a parent or a caregiver? Well, because it is scary and you'll know what to look for, but also because traffickers are very smart, and sometimes they will approach youth and tell them like, hey, if you post this ad on Instagram, the advertising, I will give you $100. You don't have to do anything else. I just really want to get some money, and this girl, it's willing to have sex with some guys, and the only thing that you're doing is posting it on Instagram. And a youth that doesn't know all of this, most likely for $100 will post an ad on Instagram, because for them it is nothing. It's just an easy way to make money. But in reality, a trafficker, the main trafficker, is protecting themselves. And what is happening to the youth now? Now, if law enforcement were to find out, he or she could potentially be charged with a trafficking, as a trafficker. And then we have the means. We have force, fraud, and coercion. What is force? Just the physical force, whatever you can think of: physical, punching, slapping, putting a gun against your head, hitting you with it, all of those horrible things. And then we have fraud, which is a good example of fraud would be if you or your youth are answering to a modeling agency ad, but then you show up in there and it's actually a pornography site, and now they are using other means such as force to make you perform some type of pornography act. That is not what you showed up for, and that is the fraud in there. Lastly, we have coercion. Many times traffickers will use coercion by telling the youth that if they don't do whatever they're requesting them to do, they will be going against their family, or they will be sharing the image that they have of the youth with everyone, or whatever it is, the blackmailing part. Lastly, we have the purpose, which is commercial sexual exploitation or forced labor. So in the United States, for it to be a case of human trafficking, you have to prove the action, the means, and the purpose. What is labor trafficking? Labor trafficking is when someone is forced, lied to, threatened, or coerced to provide labor or services. This can be legal or illegal businesses. We've seen labor trafficking in hospitals, in nursing homes, hotels, agriculture, construction, restaurants, massage parlors. Anywhere where there's an opportunity for labor, there's also an opportunity for labor trafficking. If the person it's not being paid enough, if they are not able to leave whenever they want, if they are making them work amazingly horrible hours a day without pay or overtime pay, all of those things aid to like the labor trafficking situation. And then we have sex trafficking. That is when someone is forced, lied to, threatened, or coerced into performing sexual services in exchange for something of value. Something very important to note in sex trafficking is that we're doing the exchange for something of value, not just money. It can be the exchange for something of like money, but it can also be performing a sexual service in the exchange for drugs, for a place to spend the night, for a ride to soccer practice, for some food, for some medicine, for whatever it is, something that has commercial value that is can be exchanged into sexual services. And if they're being forced, lied to, threatened, or coerced, that is sex trafficking. And then we have child sex trafficking, which is anytime someone under the age of 18 is involved in commercial sex. If you notice in here, we took away the force, fraud, and coercion words, the means word, because someone under the age of 18 cannot consent to commercial sex. Hence, if they are involved in commercial sex, they are being victims of trafficking, of sex trafficking. So why do you need to know? Sadly, now you realize that this is happening in Texas, this is happening in the world, and most likely in our communities. You as a parent or caregiver can be the first person that can step in for a youth or your own child and help them out of that situation. So by going through this presentation, you will have all the tools that you need to open up a conversation. And also something very, very important is that whenever we present to youth or to students, we tell them to look for their safe adult. So it is so important for you to know, because what if you are the safe adult in that youth's life and then they come up to you and you don't really know what to say or you don't believe them? They will shut down and not want to open about it. So it is so important for you to be aware of human trafficking, and sadly that it is happening in our community. We're going to be watching a video. This video is 6 minutes long. It is the hardest video that we'll be watching today. It's the story of a survivor that Unbound served. It is a very, very good video because it shows how a trafficking situation can happen. However, as I mentioned, it's hard and I want you to take care of yourself. So if you do not want to watch this video, this would be a great opportunity to run to the restroom, go get some water, your dinner, whatever it is, and then come back in 6 minutes. And let me know if you cannot hear it.
When I was 15, I ran away from home. I didn't have anywhere to go, no job, no money, but I was set on going my own way, making my own decisions. I had no idea this choice was going to make my life a living hell. One day, I was walking to the store and a guy pulled up, asked me if I wanted a ride. I told him I didn't, kept going, but he wouldn't give up. When I got to the store, he was waiting for me. "I'm Derek," he said, then paid for my stuff. I smiled at him, told him thank you. And the next thing I knew, he was grabbing my arm, telling me to ride around with him while he sold crack. I could have said no, but I didn't. I wanted a friend, so I got in his car. He offered me some weed. I took it. Tried to act like I'd smoked before, but I barely knew how to inhale. He was nice to me. Seemed like he liked me, so I flirted back. It felt good. After a while, we went back to his house, smoked more weed. Then he offered me 3 Xanax. He called them bars. When I took all 3, he asked me, "Are you ready?" I looked back at him and said, "For what?" When the drugs hit, they felt so good. Everything seemed so easy, so right. And then Derek started kissing me, told me exactly what I wanted to hear. "I want to be with you," he said. And for days, all we did was stay high and have sex in his house. I felt like I was his. But after a while, those days got shorter and shorter until a month would go by and we hardly talked. I thought he was done with me, so I started seeing another guy. What I didn't know was he was enemies with Derek. Word got around quick. People told me Derek was going to mess me up because I was with that boy, but I didn't change things. I don't think I believed it. That's when everything fell apart. Derek showed up one night, took me for a drive. He was acting strange, so I asked him what was wrong. Shut up and ride, he said, so I did. When we pulled up to his house, he took me inside, told me to go into his room and shut the door. I was nervous because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what to do. Back in the room, before I could do anything, he grabbed me and threw me against the wall. He started choking me. I should kill you, he said. When he let go, I fell to the ground. Before I could catch my breath, he started hitting me. I screamed, but he kept on hitting me over and over again. The pain was horrible. When he finally stopped, some of his friends came in. They told me to strip. I looked at Derek. Why are you doing this to me? Because you be playing games with me. You know what you be doing. His homeboys handed me 5 bars and told me to relax. I was scared. I didn't want them to beat me, so I took them. Started getting dizzy and confused. They stripped me, held me down, and even though I was kicking and screaming, they took turns raping me. I went numb. All I could say was mama, and stop, over and over again while they violated me. Derek ruined me for the rest of my life. And though it's hard to believe, even though he had done me wrong, even though he beat me, abused me, I still went back to him. I felt like I wasn't worth anything at all, but I thought maybe, just maybe, Derek loved me in his own way. But things only got worse and worse and worse. Eventually, he started pimping me. He drugged me up with meth, Xanax, and a shot of vodka, then sell me to grown men for $200 each. I was addicted to drugs. My body was beaten up, and I was sleeping with strangers for money that went to men who abused me. All I wanted was to escape, to be free. But I felt if I tried to leave, Derek would kill me. Then a friend told me to call the police to pick me up. Locking myself up was the only way I was going to get out of this situation. I told the police everything that had happened, and they took me in and pressed charges on Derek. For now, I'm finally safe. Though I don't know if he's locked up or still on the streets, trafficking girls just like he had trafficked me. My hope is that I can move on, accept my past, and look toward my future. I want my story to reach out and touch others, to make them understand that what happened to me can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter your age or your race. Stay safe. By the grace of God, I made it out of that situation, and I'm here today sharing my story.
Okay, so that video, it is sad and hard to watch. It's also a little bit, it's also empowering because, as you can see, there is a way out for all of the people that are going through a trafficking situation and being victimized. Sorry. It happens to students. 15 is the average age of child sex trafficking victims reported missing, and sadly, it is reported in every U.S. state. Some of the most common forms of sex trafficking is child pornography, live video, familial, strip clubs, sold on the streets, sold online, and gang-related. Unbound has served youth that has been trafficked by a lot of this type of forms. Through COVID, I believe that there is a bit of more concern about live videos sold online and child pornography, just because we are getting so used to being on our computers all day. And it is happening, but sadly, it was also happening even before COVID. And the best way to stop it is by educating ourselves and educating our youth and talking to them about the safe how to use online safely. Unbound has also served victims that have been trafficked by their own families, and many times this happens when the parent is addicted to drugs and they sell their child as a means to obtain the drugs. We've also seen a lot of youth enter a trafficking situation related to a gang, and it can be as an initiation form or to provide for the gang and to help them pay rent and any other things that they may need. Sorry. It happens in Texas. Texas, it ranks number 2 for the reports to the national hotline, and it is estimated that around 20% of the U.S. victims end up in Texas at some point in their trafficking situation. In this screen, you can see a red triangle. Can you take a guess of what that red triangle is showing? It's showing the main highways that connect the main cities in Texas. That is going from San Antonio all the way to Dallas, Fort Worth area, all the way to Houston and back. And that, sadly, it's a great way for traffickers to transport their victims around and for them to escape law enforcement officers, because if the officers are not communicating with each other what is going on. We've seen it a lot by survivors that have shared their stories, and what happens is that maybe a Friday afternoon the trafficker will pick them up from school and they will traffic the youth all across this red triangle and then bring them back Sunday night, and then the youth will be going back to school. It happens here. This specific statistics are related to Waco, but I believe you're close enough to us so that they are also a concern for you. So in 2019, there were 52 human trafficking cases investigated, and there were 46 victims served by Unbound. And as you can tell in this, we've served victims that were victims of sex trafficking, of labor trafficking, and labor and sex trafficking. And then the last statistic that we have is that there were 642 youth coded homeless in Waco ISD. And out of those, 226 were in high school. Why is this statistic so important? Because traffickers will look for the unmet needs and desires of youth, and a youth that is experiencing homelessness may be a little bit more, a youth or their family, if they're experiencing homelessness, they're maybe a little bit more vulnerable, and they may have an increased needs and vulnerabilities. So it doesn't mean that a youth that is experiencing homelessness is experiencing a trafficking situation. It's just sadly it's just kind of like related that a trafficker may approach them more easily. So who is involved? We have the victims, and then we have the traffickers, the recruiters, and the buyers. A victim is never, ever guilty of a crime. It doesn't matter if they used drugs while they were being victimized. It doesn't matter if they say that, whatever it is, a victim is never guilty of the crime. Sadly, us as a society, we're used to sometimes, just because of all the trauma that is involved within the trafficking situation, we use the victim blaming. But the reality is that the ones that are to blame are the ones in the blue box, the traffickers, the recruiters, and the buyers, because they are the ones that are guilty of the crime. So let's talk about our victims first. And who are the victims? Anyone could become a victim of sex trafficking. Doesn't matter your age, race, ethnicity, economic status, legal or illegal status, anything at all. Anyone is at risk of being a victim of sex trafficking, and that includes boys. Many times also as society, we have this perception that girls are victims and males or boys are the traffickers. The reality is that it can go either way. Some of the risk factors for boys and girls are homelessness, family dysfunction, abuse, substance abuse, time spent in foster care is a very big one, and sexual orientation. There's a difference. That doesn't mean that it's never seen on female victims. It's just seen more prevalent on boys that we've served that are survivors of sex trafficking. And the differences are that they there's a higher rate of survival sex. Survival sex means that they don't have a pimp or a trafficker as we know it, that is that person that is forcing them to perform the sexual acts, but rather they're independent and they're trying to sell their own bodies to provide for themselves or to provide for their family because they see themselves as responsible to make money, and this is the way for them to make money. But as we learned, if they are under the age of 18, they cannot consent to commercial sex, and the trafficker or the pimp in this case would be the buyer. There's lower rates of identifications because of our cultural perception of females are victims and males are traffickers. And because of that, sadly, there's also less services available. So what to look for? If you want to take your phone out and take a picture of this slide, you're more than welcome to do so. However, do know that these are things that we've known from research and from speaking to a lot of survivors of human trafficking, and are the main things that you want to be aware of. However, it doesn't mean that if this is happening, it is a trafficking situation. It just means that maybe if you're seeing this red flags, you should start a conversation with the youth or with your kids to see if there is something else going on in their lives. And it can be maybe they're being bullied at school, maybe they don't have friends, maybe they become friends with the wrong group and they're just trying to like rebel out a little bit. There may be some type of violent situation involved. It can be many other things. It doesn't mean that it is trafficking, but they are what we call red flags, and they are meant for you to guide you onto what to look for to see if there is something happening in their lives that you can help them. The main things for trafficking that you have to look for is the running away from home or frequent travel. We learned a little bit earlier about the red triangle and how a trafficker will transport them. So if your kid is telling you that they're spending every single weekend at their friend's house, and then they tell you how the friend's uncle took them to Dallas and then or San Antonio, and then they came back. All of those things, those would be red flags because that consistency is not the normal. And then the attempt to conceal bruises, marks, scars, or tattoos. Many times traffickers will try to brand their victims to take away their feeling of value and worth and make them feel more as an object. So they will tattoo either their names or even a barcode or something that represents the trafficker. So looking for those type of tattoos. Another one is notebooks or a slip of papers with names, phone numbers, or dollar amounts. And then lastly, we have any involvement in commercial sex. If you know about that, that is a sex trafficking situation if the youth is under the age of 18. So some of the barriers to identification is that 75% of youth exploitation is ongoing for 2 or more years. 75% of youth didn't see themselves as being exploited, and 50% of youth were 14 or younger when exploitation started. This is why it's so important to have a good relationship with our kids and with the youth that we're hanging out with, just because if they are going through a trafficking situation, there's a lot of trauma involved already. And from statistics, we know that many times when we find out about it, it's already been 2 years or more since the trafficking situation started. So it may be even harder for them just because of the layers of trauma to even live the situation or see themselves as victims. So what is life like for victims of sex trafficking? Many movies, songs, TV shows could portray some type of glamorous life, and it's just kind of like it goes with the job, but they're making a lot of money, but they're meeting really nice people, they're getting to go to parties or whatever it is. The reality, it is not. They're being victimized and they are being abused emotionally and physically every day. They're being traumatized, and the person that is hurting them the most, the trafficker, is the one that is making the profit. So why don't victims just leave if it's not the kidnap situation that we think of when it's like, oh, be aware of the white van that is driving around the park? Why don't they just leave if they're actually allowed to leave, if they're not being kidnapped? Well, there's fear, and all of these words, if you think about the video that we watched at the beginning, they make sense. There's fears, there's lies, hopelessness, addiction, shame, sextortion or blackmail, and then the trauma bonding or love that it's also seen a lot in domestic violence victims. And thinking back about the video, that girl shared, I was scared for my life. I was scared that if I leave, he would hurt me. There's the fear. And then lies, many times a trafficker will tell them, no one will believe you, or you will end up in jail if you tell someone. There's addiction. We also saw that in the video. He introduced the victim to drugs. There is the blackmail, as I mentioned also at the beginning, of maybe they got a picture of the youth in their underwear or something, and now they're using that to blackmail them. Now we are going to talk about what do you think of when you hear the word pimp? And this is a word that is used many times in many concepts. It's also used a lot in songs, TV shows, movies. For me, when I think of a pimp, I think of a guy. I think of someone with a lot of chains, a nice car, the rich person in my community. I don't know, it just depends on you. I just want you to create that mental image. And in reality, the pimp is a trafficker. The pimp is not the cool guy or the cool person living in your neighborhood. It is a trafficker who is abusing and taking advantage of vulnerable people. On our next slide, I will show you 6 pictures of 6 different people, and I want you to take a guess of who the pimp is. I hit the pimp there, and I just want you to take a guess. Not sure if you can leave the comments. If you want to, you're more than welcome. Or if you're with someone, tell them who you think the pimp is. And let's take a couple of seconds to pick the pimp. All right. Couple more seconds. All right. So every single person in here is a pimp. Well, actually, 5 out of the 6 have already been convicted, and 1 is waiting for trial just of how recent it was. Let me tell you their stories really quick. The first girl, the 20 years, she and her boyfriend lured a minor, a girl, through a social media app called Tagged, and then they used force and coercion to traffic this girl. Now she's serving 20 years. The next guy, his name is Jason, and Jason was running a massage business out of his home and was using teenage boys to do so. There was one specific teenage boy, he was 14 or 15, and Jason here would use the teenage boys to perform all of the massage services, but he would also allow clients to pay a little extra and use the teenage boys to perform any type of sexual act that the client was paying for. That specific 14-year-old boy that I'm going to talk about, Jason tried to traffic that boy through the London Olympics of 2012, and now he's serving 30 years. The next guy, he's actually from Waco, and he lured a runaway girl, a 15-year-old runaway, and then he kept her high on drugs and charged men to have sex with the girl while she was high. The next lady, the waiting for trial, she was actually a teacher, a high school teacher from Mejia, which is fairly close to in this area. And she is accused of trying to sell her underage family member to multiple men in Morocco. The next guy, the 10 to 20 years, he is a former DC officer and he paid for sex with a 14 and a 15-year-old girl. And once he finished performing all of the sexual acts, he pulled out his gun and pointed it to one of the girls' head and requested his money back. Now he's serving 10 to 20 years. And lastly, the 15 years, her name is Maria Candelaria, and she was trafficking her 10-year-old daughter to a businessman with the promise that this businessman was going to pay for the daughter's college education once she grew older, and also he was paying for a lot of expensive gifts for the mom. It is heartbreaking listening to all of these stories because some of them were people that the youth know and that they should trust, and some of them were completely strangers. Now, going back to that image that you had about a trafficker or the pimp, I bet you that it was not what you were expecting them to be. And that is the thing. You cannot make an image and just be scared of whatever you made that image of as like they're the bad people. You have to actually look for those red flags and look for why this specific person is trying to hang out with my kid or my youth, because as you can tell, a pimp takes many forms. So what does the pimp and traffickers have in common? They all exploit people to make money. They find their victims' weaknesses and use them against them. They lie, manipulate, force, or blackmail their victims, and they all are guilty of human trafficking. Now we're going to be talking about another type of trafficker, and this is the recruiter. A recruiter is the person that will seek out the vulnerabilities and connect the victim to traffickers. Many times recruiters are around or the age of the youth, so they could be the same age of youth or a little bit older. Many times recruiters are actually females because you feel that you can trust more a female than a male, but there's also other males that are recruiters. An example of a recruiter would be, if you have seen the movie Taken, that the two guys, I believe it was two guys, I may be wrong, but the guys that are at the airport when they introduce themselves to the girls and they're flirting with them and they seem really nice and they are just the cool guys, those would be the recruiters. They're not the main trafficker, but they are the ones that are seeking out vulnerable youth. So where will a recruiter hang out? They will hang out wherever the youth hangs out. At schools, at libraries, malls, parks, shelters, juvenile detention centers, abandoned buildings, parties, bus stops, bus rides, and internet and social media. Also, something to know about recruiters is that sadly, many times recruiters are also being victims of trafficking, and the main trafficker tells them that if they want to get out of that situation, they need to find more youth for the trafficker to traffic. So it's kind of like the exchange for them. So how do traffickers trap their victims? There's four main ways that traffickers will trap their victims. The first one is the force, do what I say or I will hurt you. Then we have, you don't have to be alone. This is a tactic that a trafficker could be using maybe with a youth that is new at school or someone that is getting bullied. And then we have, I can make all your problems go away. And in here, it can be, maybe the family is going through some financial hardship, but it can also be maybe the youth really wants the new Xbox or PlayStation and the parents don't want to buy it. So the trafficker will be the amazing friend that gets that video game for the youth, or the new purse, or shoes, heels, nails, makeup, whatever it is. And lastly, we have, I love you and I want to take care of you. The romantic situation, and the most common way that a trafficker will get the victims, trap their victims. So traffickers look for the unmet needs and desires of their victims. And as I mentioned, it can be something as a new video game, a new purse, nails, hair, anything, but it can also go to food, to shelter, to feeling loved, to feeling wanted, wanting to have a relationship. It can be anything, whatever the youth desires or needs, that is what the trafficker will target. Sorry. Here is just a graph of some of the recruitment methods. And as I mentioned, the most common one is the romantic situation. And if you go all the way to the bottom, you can see the abduction, force, or kidnapping. It is still there. It is sadly still happening, but it's not the main reason or the main way that it is happening. So yes, of course, still be scared whenever you take your kids to the park, and be aware of your surroundings, but also know that there's a list of other things that could potentially put your youth at risk of trafficking. Some of the risk factors. This whole list, it has all of the risk factors, but we're gonna focus on the orange side. It says runaway, homelessness, LGBTQ+, child sexual abuse, chronic abuse or neglect, learning disabilities, and developmental delay. Those are our main risk factors for youth. I do want to mention that LGBTQ+, it doesn't mean that if you identify as LGBTQ+, you're at risk of being a victim or you're at higher risk. It means that sadly, we've seen that youth that identify as LGBTQ+, sometimes experience bullying, sometimes experience getting kicked out of the house, or some of those layers, and that is why they're put into a high risk factor, but not their sexual identity, but the layers that it could potentially come with. Same for learning disabilities and developmental delay. It is just that we've known that youth that have some of those factors can potentially be more trustworthy to others, and also could be being bullied at school or not have friends, and the trafficker will use that as an advantage. All right, so what traffickers use is the grooming process. A grooming process is the main way that a trafficker will lure youth into the trafficking situation. Because think about it, you've told your kids about stranger danger and all those things. So if a random person, it doesn't matter how that person looks like. As an example, if I were to approach your kid and tell them, hey, I need you to come with me and I will be selling your body to multiple men or women or whatever it is, and then the money that you make out of it, I will keep it, and there's nothing else you can do about it. They will not agree at all. They will run away. So a trafficker will use what we call the grooming process, and it's basically that some steps that they use to make the victims actually become victim, make the youth actually become victim of trafficking. The first step is befriending. So befriending will be the recruiter. All of these steps are mainly the recruiter's job, and it can take weeks and months. They will be patient. Befriending, I become friend, me as a recruiter become friend with the youth, and I maybe even seem as a mentor. The parents love me. I am such a well-behaved child and I'm amazing. And then it comes intoxicate, and that can be maybe I introduce drugs or alcohol to the kid that I'm trying to victimize. And if they are already drinking or doing drugs, I will just make the availability easier. Then alienate, that can be I am amazing with the parents, but when the parents are not around, I will tell the youth or the potential victim, I will tell them, hey, how can you stand your parents? They're so annoying. They treat you like a child. Your curfew should not be at 9 or 10. You should be able to go out on the weekends, or whatever it is that is happening. And then also alienate and isolate go kind of like hand in hand. And while I'm doing that, talking about the parents, I am also introducing new group of friends that the youth will hang out. I'm also alienating them from their peer support. It can be maybe they were part of the football team and now they don't want to be part of the football team, or they were in some type of after school activity and now they don't want to go anymore and they want to hang out all the time with this new group of people. instead of their peers that they've been friends with since forever. And then we have the fifth step. And this is when maybe a youth is driving in the car with their new friends or potential traffickers, and the youth realizes that they are driving around because they're selling marijuana. Before, the youth would have been like, no, I know better. I do not want to hang out with this type of people. And now they make up excuses for it. They will say, yeah, it is weed, but it's legal in many states, or they're just doing it because they need to provide for their family. They're just doing it because they're short in rent. It's not like it's cocaine or something even worse. And then we have the sixth step, which is the last step. All of these steps took a while to happen. And then the sixth step is maybe the youth finally got into a big argument with their parents and run away. And who will show up to pick up the youth, to provide shelter that night? The trafficker. It will not even be the recruiter anymore. That will be the trafficker, who through all of this was just kind of like in the background as the older sibling or something. And now it will be the main person, and it will be their safe person to go to. And from there, they will build up that trust even more and start trafficking the youth. So social media, gaming, and sexting. These are main ones that we need to be aware of, because traffickers can be in person, but it can be also online. Social media, it's not bad, it's not scary. However, just how there's good out of social media, there's also bad out of social media. Talking to your kids, making them aware of what they're posting, and just having conversations about how to stay safe, using their private settings to the best, and just kind of like maybe setting up times to use social media at home, not using it after 8 p.m. or after dinner or whatever you see fit for your own family. Gaming, we've learned that many traffickers are playing video games because it is a great way to connect with youth that love playing video games, and more online video games where they get to chat and talk to people all around the world. It is a great window for a trafficker to become that friend that the youth needs, and they may give them some gifts, some coins for their video game, and after a while they will be asking for something in return, and they will use that as a way to traffic youth. Sexting is just making youth aware that whatever they send out, it's out, and it is very hard to bring it down. So just teaching them to be aware that whatever they don't want the world to know, they should not be sending it out. We're going to skip this video because I've been talking a lot, and I do apologize, but this is just a story about a girl that shared some inappropriate pictures to her boyfriend, and the boyfriend shared them with everyone. And this did not become a trafficking situation, but it's just raising awareness and knowing that it can happen to a lot of people, and that the importance of you having conversation with your child. It doesn't matter if you think that they're too young. If you don't have that conversation, their peers will, and you don't know what information they will be giving them. Okay, some apps to watch out for. We have I'm going to focus on the orange sections, not the black letters, because technology is amazing and new apps come out every single day. This is a list from 2018, which is not updated at all. But you do need to know that there's three main type of apps that you have to watch out for. The first one is concealment. And concealment apps are for hiding. There's a good one, Calculator Plus. It's an app that if you open your phone and open that app, it just looks like a regular calculator. However, if you put the right combination or math equation, whatever the you decided, it will open up a private setting where you can have private text messages, private pictures, private browser, everything private. And then chatting. A lot of these ones are very common, famous. They're not all bad. The first one, Omegle, I don't know how to pronounce it. That one is a big one because that one, it's literally, you just open it It's a web page. You open it and you share your screen, and people all around the world share their screen with you, and you get to talk to them, and you also don't know what you're going to be seeing next. Snapchat, Instagram are also very famous. It doesn't mean that they're scary or that you should not be using them. It just means, again, not talking to strangers. If someone tries to connect with you that you don't know, not accepting them, having your settings on private. And then we have the connection apps, and those are for dating or for hookups. If the youth is under the age of 18, there is not even a reason of why they should have these apps, since they're only made for 18 and older. We are having this conversation because sadly there's people that is willing to pay for sex with minors. If there was no one willing to do it, I would be out of a job, and to be honest, I would be happy that that was a reality. But we have buyers, and buyers equal the demand. They are the ones that are making that 150 billion annually profit that we learned at the beginning. And who are the buyers? Just how the victims and the traffickers. Buyers are also anyone. The sheriff's department here in McLennan County has arrested as young as 16 and as old as 75. They've arrested a baseball coach. They've arrested other law enforcement. They've arrested bus drivers, doctors, multiple different backgrounds, ethnicities. So anyone can be a buyer. It's just the same as a pimp. You cannot just put an image to that person because it can be anyone. And here we only have males, but it doesn't mean that females cannot be. So what else contributes to demand? We're on the last part of our presentation. And the last topic that we're going to be talking about, it's a bit of a taboo topic. However, I do ask that you listen to it with an open mind, because it is a very important topic, and that is pornography. So pornography is contributing to the demand. Why is that? It's because it shapes the sexual desires. And that just means that when we watch pornography, we are watching a lie, and it shapes our desires of what we think that a relationship should look like. It is also used by traffickers to introduce and desensitize victims. We've known from survivors that have shared that many times pornography has been made out of them, or they have been shown pornographic videos as a request for them to perform whatever sexual act is in the video. So it is just a hard topic, and it's hard because of those reasons. And it also shapes, there's actually correlation that shows us that when we become addicted to pornography, or even just like to watch it often, our brain will learn how to create a relationship with the screen instead of with another human being. And that is scary. However, there are ways to get out of it. And pornography and youth. It's happening that youth are watching pornography. A study of the university students found that 95% of boys and 62% of girls had seen internet pornography during their adolescence. And the nationally representative survey found that 64% of young people ages 13 to 24 actively seek out pornography weekly or more often. So we are watching our last video, and this is Dr. Pat Love, and it's an interview from Fight the New Drug, which is an amazing organization, Fight the New Drug. If you or someone you know is struggling with pornography, they have great resources, or if you just want to learn more about it. And she will explain this way better than whatever I could ever do.
One of the areas you don't often hear mentioned, it's almost like you don't bring it up in polite conversation, is adolescence and pornography. And we know it's prevalent. We know that young children are seeing pornography. It's frightening at how young our children are seeing pornography. What is especially frightening about this experience in the emerging brain, and a brain that's still formulating and organizing, is that it changes your sexual set point. It changes your sexual expectations. It changes the stimulation point. It alters your brain in a way that makes you crave more stimulation. You know, if you just think about the fact that our brain has to have stimulation, that's how it gets organized. We love stimulation. We love novelty. We love being entertained. We love anything shiny that's moving, it's interesting and makes us curious. We love that. You know, that's part of human nature. But if you add the sexual stimulation to that, it can be like crack cocaine with your brain. And we don't realize how dangerous it is. As parents, as adolescents, we have to realize what we're doing to our brain, how we're changing it. We're changing it in some ways forever. This is a wonderful instrument, this brain we've been given. And to alter it in that way, you want to do it with consciousness, not just abandonment. You know, it's so accessible. It's so anonymous. It's so addictive. I mean, it is really so much more lethal that we have now a generation of adults who just can't be satisfied or pleased or happy with real life relationships. No one can compete with the constant stream of novelty. And you don't realize how you got there. You got there gradually. Sometimes it started innocently with a normal curiosity, but that can be, again, like crack cocaine, changing your brain forever.
So we are coming to an end in our presentation, and this is the most important slide out of it. This one is the what not to do and what to do slide. If you discover that your child is sexting, is chatting with strangers, or is hiding their online activity, the first thing that you do not want to do is to freak out. As a parent, it may be very hard to hide that emotion of shock, but the youth is coming to you, trusting you, and you just want to be there for them. It doesn't matter what they're sharing. You are the adult and you're the one that they really need the support from at that specific moment. So you have to reassure them that you care and that you want to protect them. You have to have a calm conversation about the dangers involved. If it's not a trafficking situation, if it's a trafficking situation, still dangers involved. But in that case, then you will actually contact law enforcement to keep them safe. And then the other thing is, do not delete everything. As a parent, if you see that your youth is maybe talking to a stranger online and that the stranger is sending them nudes, or the youth sent their own nudes already, you want to delete and just pretend that it never happened. Well, the best thing that you can do to protect them is actually not deleting everything. You can block the person for sure, turn off the phone, and contact law enforcement, because that way law enforcement can actually start a case against that person and keep the youth safe. And then set appropriate restrictions and monitor practice. That means having conversations with your kids. It's so, so important. Being there for them. They're living in a very, very technological society that many of us did not. And it's just different culture. It's a different life. So just having a very trustworthy relationship and that they know that they can count on you if anything ever happens, it's very important. And with that trusting, it also comes setting restrictions and monitoring practices. And that can be maybe not allowing your kid to play video games all day until midnight, or every weekend until they go to bed, or whatever it is in your family. Lastly, as I mentioned, contact law enforcement if you suspect of a crime. Reporting in Texas, if you're over the age of 18, you're a mandated reporter, and human trafficking involving a minor is a form of child abuse, and you're a reporter for suspected abuse or neglect. So this goes to your own child, but even if you see your child's friend coming over and there's some of those red flags that we talked about today, you have to make a report. And if you do it because you believe that that child is being victimized, you will not get into any trouble, even if you were wrong. But do know that you could potentially be saving the life of youth. And if it's immediate danger, call 911. So what do victims and survivors need to know? They need to know that there is a way out. Unbound is here, and many other amazing agencies are there for them. And we want to protect every person that is being victimized, and we want to serve them. So you always have to reassure that there is a way out. So what do you do if you suspect grooming or trafficking? As I mentioned, you make a report, you contact your law enforcement agency, and you can also always reach out to Unbound, and we're here to serve. This is my evaluation. If you have your phone, you can scan it, and there's also a webpage on the bottom. It will take you 3 minutes to do it, and I would really, really appreciate it. And that is all I have for you. Sorry that I talked a lot.
Thank you so much, Daniela. That was very informative. If you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat and we'll try to answer those. Daniela, I'm not seeing anything coming into the chat right now, but I'm assuming that if anyone has any questions or anything like that, they can reach you through the information that you put on the screen.
Yes, I can also leave the information in the chat.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yes, not a problem. So.
Okay, thank you all for joining us tonight. Daniela is going to put her contact information in the chat. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to her. We really appreciate you doing this for us tonight.
No, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye, guys.